Teresa, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to share your story and your journey and your exit. I know you're a native San Diegan. You went to SDSU.
Go
Uh,
Aztec.
yeah, go Aztecs, exactly. I'm a Terera, so
Okay.
I'm on the other side of the valley. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, I started working at a TV station, KFMB TV here in San Diego, when I was still in high school. And I worked there all through college. And so I started out wanting to actually be a news reporter, a news broadcaster. And when I was about halfway through college, I realized that if I wanted to stay in San Diego, I wasn't going to be able to be in that business at the time. I'd have to go to Yuma or, some very, very small market. And I wasn't interested in leaving San Diego. So I switched to teaching. And by the time I got out of school, I decided I didn't want to teach. So I leveraged the connections that I had made at KFMB and I got a job in marketing and PR and immediately found that I really enjoyed it. I loved to write and it seemed like a good fit for me. So from there, I worked at a couple of agencies here in San Diego, learned a lot, had some great bosses, some not so great bosses, but learned a lot. And then I was offered a job as a law firm marketing director. And I was the first law firm marketing, or I'm sorry, one of the first law firm marketing directors in the US. When I took that job, there were about 20 other people doing law firm marketing. So I like to say I was on the cutting edge of law firm marketing. And a lot of the things that law firms now very typically do, I was sort of at the forefront of developing those ideas and moving them forward. And the industry is very big now. So then I was at the law firm for, 7, 8 years. And one day I was sitting in the back of a conference room next to one of the partners. And we were at a firm retreat. And the speaker they brought in was talking about marketing. And the partner turned and looked at me and said, "Why is she standing up there talking about marketing? You know all this stuff. I've heard you say all the exact same things. Why aren't you a consultant?" And I went, oh, voila. So I made my exit within about 6 months from the law firm and started my own company.
Okay. So it sounds like that decision was relatively easy to leave, I'm sure a good salary and go on your own, or did you have second thoughts when you were going through this process?
I never really had second thoughts there. I was fortunate because my husband had a good job with good benefits.
Got it.
So I was able to do that, not having to worry about healthcare, which is huge. And I decided very quickly that I couldn't start the business without clients.
Yes.
So I went out and got 2 clients, and then I proposed to the law firm I was working at that they hire me on as a consultant instead of as an employee. And so when I started the company, I had 3 clients already. And I'm very proud of the fact that the first month I was profitable, and I was profitable every single month from then on out.
Amazing.
Never had a deficit.
Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely. Because I know as somebody who also owned a small marketing consulting firm
I
for years,
remember.
it's just like it can be a little up and down, right? You land a big client, you lose a client, you're always doing business development. I mean, it's a whole process.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And I remember when our paths crossed
Yeah.
when you were doing marketing consulting. I was just telling Nicole Hageman who bought my business that yesterday. Yeah, I don't remember the details, but I know you didn't hire me. But I remember that. It was, that was a long, long time ago.
It was. Yeah, absolutely. Why the name? I'm assuming TW is your initials. What's the 2? TW2.
My husband is Tom Warren.
Okay, got it.
W's or TW2. I always like to say I was happy to put his name on the door, but I didn't want him in business with me. And that's because, I think that's key to our 41 years of marriage, is that we never actually worked together. I maybe in the early years would have liked it. He came from the TV news industry, so there was a lot of crossover. But I think as time goes on, it was kind of good for us to have our own separate avenues as well. I admire couples that can work together.
Yes, absolutely. I echo that. So over the course of 30 plus years, you did PR, you did marketing. Maybe give us, some examples of some of the types of projects that you worked on, types of clients you worked with, and then how big did you grow your team?
Mm-hmm. Well, I started out leveraging off of my law firm background. So my first couple of clients were law firms. I quickly went into the accounting space because the similarities were so much the same. And from there, I had some clients that were lawyers that were also doing real estate, and they asked me to work in real estate. So then I expanded into that area. And that was kind of the model for the first 15 years or so, servicing professional service. For the most part, I did some work with nonprofits, and I worked with a travel agency, which was so much fun, but primarily working with professional service providers. And around 15 years into it, my son, who was 1 when I started the business, and let me backtrack a little bit. One of the reasons why I started TW2 was I had 2 very small sons. I had a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I had a husband that worked crazy hours and would get on a plane and fly somewhere at the drop of a hat. And I needed flexibility. And so I thought this was a good route. I never planned on growing my firm. I always said I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to be independent. So fast forward 15 years, that 1-year-old is now 16. He gets his driver's license. And all of a sudden, I don't have to drive carpool. I don't have to worry about picking him up after school and taking him to sports practices. And, I'd go to the games, but I didn't have to get there an hour early. So I thought, I think I'd like to spend more time really focusing on the business. Now, I'd always been focused on business, but I also had a lot of balance in my life between family and business. Then this was an opportunity for me to adjust that balance and focus more on the business. And right at that same time, within maybe a month, Jennifer Whitelaw, another W, not a TW, but another W, asked me if I knew anybody that might be interested in acquiring her firm. And I looked at her and said, I think I would. And my husband was standing next to me at the time, and he did a laugh. I said, yeah, I think this is a good time for me to expand. Well, Jen is such a gem, and we had worked together on projects. So I convinced her I would take over her agency and her 1 employee, but she had to scan and work for me. She was living in Seattle at the time. She moved up there. And so she said, great. So I went from 1 to 3 people in the matter of a month. So from there, it just started growing and growing and growing. And when the business was acquired, we had 12 people at that time.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to pause on the acquisition you made. So you've been on both sides of the table now.
Yes.
How did that go? Any words of advice, things you learned from acquiring a business?
That's a really good question now that I've done it both ways. I hadn't really thought about that. I think because Jen and I already knew each other, it made it very easy. We didn't have to have a courtship. We didn't have to date before we got married. And we knew each other, had similar interests, desires, goals, styles. So blending what she had done into what I was doing was easy. From the logistical part, she got a lawyer, I got a lawyer. It was a very simple contract. I think it was 30 days, and signed it, and off we went. So it was very, very easy. There wasn't a lot. She was a two-person firm. She had a good practice, a good business, but it wasn't a lot. So it was very easy to work through the details and make it happen. But I think one of the keys was I did know her, and I think that makes a difference.
And having her stay on too, that can be tricky with clients, right? This is, they grow accustomed, and they hired Jen, they hired her firm, and, have grown to, build a relationship with her. So that can be tricky to, to move people over to another, relationship, another direction.
Absolutely. Very tricky. And the fact that she had left San Diego to move to Seattle, she didn't have feet on the ground anymore. Yeah. So I ended up being those feet on the ground for her. And it gave me the opportunity to learn. She was doing a lot of banking science.
Yep.
So I immediately learned a lot about financial marketing, and I learned a lot about real estate from her, and she learned a lot about law from me and accounting. So it was a good mix. It was a good blend. Yes, it happened very quickly, but it happened quickly because I knew who I was acquiring, and who I was going to move forward with.
And how long did she stay on, Teresa?
She's still here.
Okay. Oh,
yeah, she's still at the company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So this was, because a lot of times, folks will sell their practice and then move on to something else, right? So that's interesting.
Yeah, she's back in San Diego now.
Oh, she is.
Seattle to DC, and she's
Okay.
back in San Diego now.
Okay.
And yeah, she's still with TW2.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
When you're selling or buying a consultancy-based business, it is different than buying, say, a manufacturing business with a lot of hard assets and inventory and, lots on the balance sheet, so to speak. What should somebody be thinking about? Let's say somebody's watching this and they own a marketing firm or some other type of professional service firm where they don't have hard assets or IP, so to speak. What kind of numbers should folks be thinking about? A lot of times we talk about, a multiple, right? A multiple on the top line, a multiple on the bottom line, somewhere in between. What should folks be thinking about?
When I first started thinking about exiting TW2, I didn't know if we had any value. And a friend and client, Steve Sefton, who's now the president of Endeavor Bank, used to be with Regions Bank, took me out to lunch one day because he wanted me to experience what his consultative banking process was. Because he talked about it a lot, and I just didn't quite understand it. And so he took me out to lunch, and he did the process on TW2. And it was in that moment, that day, that lunch, that I realized I really do have some value here. I really have built something tangible, even though everything is intangible to some extent. So then that put me on the search of, well, how do I value this? And everybody that has an opinion is on the internet telling you what that opinion is. And I kind of came upon, you had to know exactly what the value of the business was. And you had to know what the market was willing to pay for it. And you had to meet somewhere in the middle. You hear these multiples of 2, 3, 1.5. Well, if nobody wants to pay that, that's not the value. So first thing that I did once I had a potential buyer was go get a valuation done. Maybe that's putting the cart before the horse, but I'll get to that in a second. So I went and I got a valuation done, and it was a very thorough. It looked at all of my financials. It went out to the market. This company had actually sold some other marketing and PR firms very similar in size to mine. They were able to utilize that data. And we came upon a value that I was very comfortable with. Now, especially from the fact that I didn't think a year before that I had any value. So, this was great. And from there, I checked it out with some trusted advisors, and everybody agreed that the information that I had gotten, the approach they had taken, it all made sense. And then ultimately, Nicole Hageman, who bought the company from me, agreed too, that the value made sense after she had her experts review it. Now, Nicole had been a consultant at TW2 for a few years before we came to the deal to acquire the company. So it was very similar to the process with Jen. I knew her. I knew her values. I knew that she would take the company only in a better direction, and that I could trust her with my third child. And that was very important to me. I didn't necessarily compromise on price, but it was very, very important to me to know that who I was selling the business to was a good person, was a great person, and had the same ethics and visions that I did. And I was so blessed that that is Nicole. And so I think that was really important, again, knowing who was acquiring my business.
Absolutely. You had that relationship, you had that history. The valuation, how much should somebody be thinking about budgeting for a good valuation?
I got estimates between $3,000 and $5,000.
Okay.
And I went with the higher one, to be honest with you. I just felt it was worth the extra money to really get in-depth information and really understand, not only for me, but for Nicole.
Yeah.
Really understand what she was getting to. I've never been one for surprises. Don't like to be surprised. And I didn't want her being surprised either. So very, very thorough evaluation and analysis of our financials.
Okay, maybe not as quite as quick as with when you bought it from Jen.
No, Jen's was maybe the shortest in history. My lawyer told me mine was one of the longest he'd ever worked on. No fault of mine, no fault of Nicole's whatsoever. The time that we started getting very serious about the acquisition was late 2019. In March 2020, the pandemic hit. And Nicole and I agreed it was not the time to be looking at an acquisition. The future was just too uncertain. So we put everything on hold. And as the world started to get back to normal, we brought it up again. And then there was a health scare. And then there was an EDD audit. I got the dreaded 1099 wage earner audit from the EDD. That took 6 months. And then there was some financing issues. The delayed it. Nothing wrong. It just took longer than we had been led to believe. And so it was just kind of one thing after another. So we started in late December 2019, and we closed August 2022.
Makes sense. A lot happened in between that period of time. So,
I mean, life happens.
Yes.
Life happens. And Nicole was who I wanted to sell the business to. I wasn't going to go look any further. We had a deal. I was going to honor it. And I agreed with her. It just wasn't a good time for either of us to be making big changes.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I had offered Nicole a couple of different ways to do it: outright cash, or I would carry back some paper, basically. And that was just to give her some options and to help her understand what her options were. So she went and looked at that, and she decided she wanted to cash a full cash deal, which was fine with me. So the one lesson learned from that I think she will agree with me on is that the financing, the company she worked with, customer service was not their strong suit. And communication was not as good as it could have been. And it took longer than we thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was financing through a bank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it just, they moved very slowly. But that at this point, that was okay. You know, we were.
You had waited several years anyway.
Exactly. A few more months wasn't going to matter. And I shared Nicole's frustration. I really did. I knew she was trying. It was absolutely nothing that she had done.
Yes. Do we want to share the name of this bank so other folks don't make the same mistake?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't even remember. Wiped it out of my mind.
Okay. All right.
I had feelings with them.
Fair enough. I understand. So what was next, Teresa? Did you stay on? Are you still on? Talk about that transition process, because this is a big deal. Over 30 years, you built this company. Like, this is your blood, like you said, third child.
Yeah, third child. Sometimes got more attention than the first two, I'll tell you.
Sure.
The deal that we had included me staying on. Originally, Nicole was hoping I'd stay on as much as 5 years, but I'm 65 years old and I did not want to be working, until I was 70. So that was one of our negotiating factors. And, honestly, I knew she didn't need me. I knew she was going to do great on her own. So we kind of brought it down to 2 years. And then when the financing and everything else in the process started to drag on, we dropped it to 1 year. So that was about 6 months ago. So a little over 6 months ago. So I'm still working with the company. I work primarily with one of our larger clients, and I do other special projects when I can help out. And I initially gave Nicole a lot of insight and background, but she's a very bright woman. She caught on very quickly, and we still chat once a week, but she's doing great. And I'm always interested to hear all the changes that she's making. I decided, and it was easy to do, that I wasn't going to try to hang on to the way I did things. She bought this company because she had a vision and she wanted to grow it, and she is growing it. It's growing, and I'm not going to let my ego or my way of doing things, I'm not going to let that affect me. Yeah. And I have no reason to, because she's doing such a great job. And so I'm working with clients and making a little pocket money, which is great, and having fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But I'm also enjoying semi-retirement. So.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I can imagine. And is your husband retired?
He is. He retired going over 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Okay. That can be a tough, transition when one spouse is still full steam and one spouse is not. I mean, that can be, but you all have been together for so long. I'm sure that was easy.
The first thing I told him he had to do, the first morning he was retired, he came down and he stood in the doorway of my home office and stared at me. And I said, "No, you're going to have to make an appointment if you want to talk to me.
Send me a calendar invite."
Exactly. So now, I get text messages from him, and he'll be upstairs in his office and he'll text me or, call me. "Where are you?" "I'm in the garage." "Oh, okay." So, but now we're traveling a lot more and just having fun.
Fantastic. So you've got another 6 months before you fully transition out. What do you anticipate that's going to feel like, Teresa?
Every day is different. It really is. And I'm not sure I'm going to actually, at the end of 6 months, be ready to fully leave. And if Nicole would like me to stay on and we're kind of at the pace I'm doing and the type of work I'm doing, that would be great. I struggle still to this day, 6 months later, with the feeling of how foreign it is not to have so much to do all the time. I'm trying to enjoy not having a lot of pressure on me, but it's hard. You become addicted to that adrenaline and that rush and that pace, and slowing down is necessarily as easy as one might think it is. I used to, before I was retired and I was still running things, I used to wake up in the morning and I think, if I was retired today, what would I do? And that helped me transition because I already had some ideas of what I wanted to do. I don't necessarily do everything that I thought I'd be doing at this point. I still focus a lot on work and getting work done because that's what I know. But it's easier to get up and go do something else or take a day off or take a week off. And I'm learning to appreciate the freedom that I now have. And I'm hoping to start doing even more things. The very first thing that I wanted to do was start volunteering at my granddaughter's preschool. She goes to a cooperative preschool, and my son and daughter-in-law aren't necessarily able to do the twice month commitment that you need to do at their school for volunteerism. So I pick up days and I go volunteer, and I have loved it. And I loved working with my kids in my kids' classrooms when they were little. And back to being so blessed and so fortunate that I had this career that allowed me to focus on my kids. I was PTA president. I did all of that, team mom, room mom. And now I'm revisiting all that with my granddaughter, and it's quite fun.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
One last final question, Teresa. Would you have done in this acquisition, the second where you acquired, would you have done anything differently?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything differently. It took a long time.
Yeah.
But that was okay. That was the way it was meant to happen. Yeah. And things happen for a reason. And I think that one of the reasons why it maybe took a long time, I haven't even shared this with Nicole yet. I was just thinking about this the other day, is I don't think I was really ready to transition yet. And I think having those extra couple of years to really prepare myself, I think was meant to be. So there is nothing I could change. My words of advice for others are know who you're selling it to. Even if you don't know them personally, know of them, learn about them, and just make sure that this is going to be right for your vision for the company moving forward. It's no longer going to be your company, that you are so invested in it. You're going to still want to know you're putting it in good hands. And my one piece of advice that I give everyone is always trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't going to work. And the few times that I've made really bad decisions, I should have listened to myself, but I didn't. And I think that's really, really true when it comes to selling your business. If it doesn't feel right, stand back and evaluate and think, what isn't right here? Because it's not just about getting a nice big check. It's about your legacy, moving on, and what you've built. And you can't expect someone to necessarily have that same vision, and you can't expect them to carry out your vision. But again, you want to make sure you're leaving it in good hands. Like giving your child up when they go to college. They can go party a little bit. That's fine, but you want them to keep that moral compass and those ethics that you have instilled in them. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, Teresa, it's been lovely chatting with you and learning about your journey. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Well, thank you. This is an exciting project. I had so much fun watching the other videos that you had done in the other interviews. I have to admit, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome when I watched them. I'm like, wow, these women are badass.
Yeah, and I think this is so important, at least to me, and I because we hear these stories of men who have sold their business. This is talked about in the media over and over again. I sold my business, I've got 10 businesses, I did this, I did, kind of thing. And we don't hear these stories of women as often. And so I'm on a mission to tell these stories.
Well, as usual, men are more than happy to tell the stories. Us women are, nobody really cares that much, or it wasn't that big of a deal, and so yeah,
But it is a big deal, and it goes back to if you can't see it, you can't be it, or it's harder to be it, right? And to know and hear other folks and what their journey was like and how they approached the process in a just a conversation, I think is hopefully inspiring to others to consider it. A lot of women just walk away from their business. They just say, okay, I'm done and I'm going to close things down and go on and do whatever else. But there's oftentimes an opportunity there that I think it really gets overlooked in many cases.
I agree with you completely. That's why I wanted to share with you that story about Steve Sefton talking to me, because that was such a pivotal moment for me to realize I really have built something of value here. I had been thinking, oh, I'll just give everybody my clients and they can, go start their own companies, or maybe I'd take, 10% of the revenue for the first year, or what, I just and Steve just was the one, I can't tell you which company's worth, but there's value there. And you need to explore that. And I will always be indebted to him for that. And to Nicole, to being such a good person to be able to pass TW2 along to.
Yeah, and hopefully inspire folks to think about how to build their business, to build in some of those, the value, right? The systems, the brand, the goodwill, all the things that go along with this. Like if we enter into a business thinking that there might be an opportunity to sell at some point, we may structure the business slightly differently, or, at least document things and make sure that we're trying to get out of the way, so to speak, as a business owner, or at some point make ourselves obsolete.
Well, and that's exactly what I tried to do. The one thing that I think is so important is scalability. And there's no value in someone buying a company just to run its status quo, or there's less value. Part of what you're buying is the potential to make it something greater and better. And so that has to be scalable. And so that is really one of the things the second 15 years of my career at TW2, I really focused on. And, good people. And like you said, brand, very important. And just, making sure that I was making it profitable for everybody, not just for me, and not just, money in, money out, and really trying to build that foundation.
Well, again, Teresa, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.